Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. How are you doing, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji, good. How are you, Prabhuji?
Yeah. Thoughts now. Do you know of
Yes, Prabhuji, we can see the screen.
Do you know from which place? From where should we continue?
I will check, Prabhuji. Volume 1, chapter 30. Volume 1, chapter 30, yes, Adiras Prabhu has written. A Dream Fulfilled, continuation. London.
Yeah.
Sorry, Prabhuji, that was YouTube. I
Hare Krishna, Rathikali Mataji. Do you remember from where we start now?
Prabhuji. Yeah, I have that.
Bookmark?
Yeah. 1 second. It's the not this. Yeah, London, a dream fulfilled at down.
Is it this point? If I, having been whisked from the airport to Titan host Prabhupada had seen Little London.
Wait a minute. I'm just.
No, I think I think this is the thing.
Recent.
In September, Śrīla Prabhupada wrote to Satsvarupa about his stay in Titan House Park.
Uh,
I think
Yes,
from
Prabhuji.
here.
yeah, November
right?
3 was done.
September is over?
I think this was not over. Start from here, right?
I think so, yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's start from here. There is no harm. I'll try to speed up so that we can still make the whole chapter today. Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-salakaya Chakshurumritam Jnana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Katamahim Dadati Swapadantikam Vam Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namne Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Vanchakalpadarabhyascha Kripasindhubhyo Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. We are reading from Śrīla Prabhupāda-līlāmṛta, Volume 1, Chapter 30, in continuation. In September, Śrīla Prabhupada wrote to Satsvarupa about his stay at Titanhost Park. Here there is a nice big hall, exactly suitable for a temple. I have begun to give lectures here on specific days, but there are no outsiders coming. Prabhupada wanted to preach to outsiders, and if they wouldn't come to him, he would go to them. His first outside meeting, arranged by the devotees, was at Camden Town Hall in the heart of London and was well attended both by Britishers and by Indians. After Prabhupada's brief lecture, only about 15 minutes, a lively question and answer session began. Women, would you say Krishna is God or Krishna is love? Prabhupada, without love, how can Krishna be God? Women, no, I asked you. Prabhupada, yes, that is the real position. Krishna means all attractive. Anything which is all attractive, you generally love. Man, then the particle of the Supreme Being, man, is also all love? Prabhupada, yes, you are part and parcel of Krishna. You want to love somebody and Krishna wants to love you. This is loving exchange. But instead of loving Krishna, you are trying to love something else. That is your trouble. The love is there in you and Krishna, and when the love will be exchanged between you and Krishna, that will be your perfection of life. Man, thank you. Indian woman, would it matter if I worship any other? Would it matter whether I worship Krishna or Shiva or Krishna or Buddha? Would it matter? Prabhupada, if you worship Shiva, you will get Shiva. If you worship Krishna, you will get Krishna. Why do you expect Krishna by worshipping Shiva? What is your idea? Indian woman, my idea is, would it matter? Prabhupada, don't you suppose if you purchase a ticket for India, you will go to India? How can you go to America? Indian woman, that is not the point. Prabhupada, this is the point. That is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Yanti Devi Deva Vrata Devan Pitrayanti Pitravrata. Indian woman, but my point is, Prabhupada, your point, you understand. Why don't you understand the description of Bhagavad Gita? If you worship demigods like Shiva and others, you will go there. If you worship Krishna, you will go to Krishna. What is the difficulty to understand? Indian woman, do you think that Shiva is a demigod? Prabhupada, yes, why not? Indian woman, but Krishna says that it doesn't matter the way you worship. All means have the same goal and you will reach the same goal. You can take the different paths, but you will come to me eventually. Prabhupada, try to understand. Suppose you have to go to 42nd floor of a building and you are going up one after another. So the goal is 42nd floor. But you cannot claim that after going few steps, I have come to the goal, 42nd store. The path is one, that's all right, but you have to reach the ultimate goal. You do not know what is the ultimate goal. You simply say all paths reach to this goal, but you do not know what is the ultimate goal. A young hippie stood up and shouted, Hey Swamiji. People in the audience turned around and looked. You said if we are not careful in the next life, we'll become a dog. But I want to tell you that I don't mind if I become a dog in my next life. You have my blessings, said Prabhupada, and the young man sat down. One night, lectures in scattered places around the city proved further the need of a temple. Prabhupada had experienced a similar situation in New York City in 1965. At the time also he had had no temple. His audience would listen respectfully and then disperse and he would never see them again. To become Krishna conscious, however, a person needed to hear about Krishna repeatedly and for that a temple was required. Once Prabhupada had his temple established in London, thousands would be able to come and hear about Krishna, take prasadam and appreciate the lovely deity form of the Lord. A temple would provide guests with regular, intimate contact with devotees of the Lord and this was essential. In the absence of a temple, however, Prabhupada was prepared to go on lecturing all over London. Krishna's teaching, Krishna Kirtan, and Krishna Prasadam were absolute good. They would act regardless of the external situation. Conway Hall was a 500-seat auditorium in Red Lion Square in central London. By arranging a series of 12 lectures over the next 3 months, the devotees hoped to oblige Prabhupada to stay in England at least that long. Gurudas had drawn up a list of lecture titles and printed 50,000 handbills. Admission would be 2 shillings and 6 pence. The first night at Conway Hall, about 100 people attended. Prabhupada sat on a cushion atop a table, leading Kirtan, while his disciples sat on the floor. Yamuna played harmonium, and Mukunda and Kulashekara played mridanga. Prabhupada's Radhakrishna deities stood on their altar on a separate table beside Prabhupada. A Hare Krishna mantra banner hung against the back wall. Gurudas had built tonight's lecture, Teachings of the Vedas, and Prabhupada explained that Vedic teachings can be understood only by hearing them from self-realized saints. After Prabhupada's lecture, the audience gave a sustained round of applause. Prabhupada answered questions and had Yamuna led a final kirtan. The next day, Prabhupada wrote to Dr. Shyam Sundar Das Brahmachari in India. I spoke for about 1 hour, and after that, they continued clapping, which confirms their appreciation. At the second Conway Hall engagement, when Prabhupada stood during the kirtan and began to dance, the devotees on stage joined him, dancing in a circle. Ishana played his trumpet, and even Saraswati, her dapper showing beneath her short dress, jumped up and down in ecstasy. Each week would bring another Conway Hall meeting, and Prabhupada's dancing became a regular feature. One night at Conway Hall, an Englishman stood and asked, "Why is it you don't try to help the people of your own country? Why did you come so far? Why don't you simply approach the big politicians? There are big politicians to try to help there." Prabhupada, you are a great politician, therefore I am approaching you. Is that all right? Another man asked, if this is the absolute truth, how come there's so many people in London but not so many people are in attendance here? Prabhupada, when you are selling diamonds, you don't expect many customers. But if you are giving cut glasses, fools will come. You have a very precious thing, this Krishna consciousness movement. Don't expect that all the foolish people will take to it. Some sincere souls have come. You please also take it. Prabhupada felt encouraged by the response of the English. Regularly, the audience would join in chanting and dancing. In London, things are going on nicely, and last evening we had a meeting in Conway Hall, and several hundred persons were joining us in chanting and dancing. After the meeting, one reporter from the biggest London newspaper came behind the stage to get further information about our movement for publication in his paper. So I am very encouraged to see the nice reception that the people and the news media are giving to our activities in London. Late in October, Prabhupada spoke at English Speakers Union to a predominantly Indian audience. He began his talk. Although we are a small gathering together today, this is a very important meeting. India has got a message. You are all respectable Indians present here in an important city of the world, London, and I have come here with an important mission. It is not the same mission as Indians generally have who come here and to other foreign countries to beg something. I have come here to give something. So you please try to cooperate with me. On October 30th, Prabhupada lectured at Oxford Town Hall. His talk was basic, although embellished with more Sanskrit quotes than usual. His disciples had not expected much of a response from the Oxford students, yet the hall was filled. And when Prabhupada stood and gestured for everyone to raise their hands and dance, practically the entire audience responded. While Mukunda played the huge pipe organ and hundreds joined the chanting, Prabhupada held his arms high and began powerfully jumping up and down. Yesterday we had a very successful meeting at Oxford at Town Hall. About 350 boys, girls, old men, ladies and gentlemen participated, and we made them all dance and chant with us, every one. After the meeting, many boys and gentlemen came to congratulate me. Prabhupada received an invitation to appear on British most popular TV talk show, Late Night Lineup. The interviewer, accustomed to snappy repartee, tried to engage Prabhupada in his style of conversing, avoiding long philosophical answers. Swamiji, he said, do you have a concept of hell in your religion? Yes, Prabhupada replied. London is hell. The host appeared stunned, as if beaten at his own game from the start. Prabhupada continued, it is always damp, cloudy, and rainy. In India, the sun is always shining. The interviewer was still at a loss of words, and Prabhupada, perhaps sensing the man's embarrassment, added, "Of course, it is a very great credit to the English people to have established such a great civilization in such a climate." There were other questions, and Prabhupada talked for an hour explaining the Krishna consciousness movement and philosophy. The next day, a London newspaper announced Swami calls London hell. The Hare Krishna mantra record was still high on the charts in England and throughout the continent, and this fame led a Dutch television company to invite Prabhupada's disciple to Amsterdam, all expenses paid, to do a show. They would have only 5 minutes of airtime, but Prabhupada accepted it. 5 minutes, he said, is sufficient. We will preach the whole philosophy of Krishna consciousness in 5 minutes. Prabhupada and his party took the ferry from Dover across the English Channel to France and then traveled by train to Amsterdam. The television studio located outside the city was in a modern air-conditioned building with constant loudspeaker announcements, artificial plants, a TV in every room but no windows. By the way, everyone is able to follow, or is it too quick? The receptionist brought Prabhupada and his disciples to a windowless room with painted concrete walls. In India, Prabhupada said, "We wouldn't consider living in a place without windows and fresh air. I want to sit by a window." So the devotees checked through the entire building until finally in the third floor hallway they found a window. Moving their chairs with them, they went with Prabhupada and sat by the window. By the year 2000, no one will see the light of day. Prabhupada said, cities will be forced to live underground. They will have artificial light and food but no sunlight. The producer of the program arrived, surprised to find that Swami was also going to be part of the act. The surprise was a pleasant one, and he welcomed Prabhupada to his show. "Now, what I want you and your group to do," he explained, "is to sing your record, Hare Krishna mantra. You don't have to actually sing out loud. We are going to play your record and your mime. Pretend you are playing those instruments. Pretend you are singing." He allowed that afterward Prabhupada could speak for 2 minutes. Just before Prabhupada and devotees went on stage, they had to wait in the wings while a local Dutch group danced around pretending to play their saxophone, trumpets, and drums. Then the producer brought in a table with a cushion on it for Prabhupada and seated the devotees around Prabhupada on the floor. The cameras began, the record played, and the devotees started to mime. Suddenly, clouds produced by dry ice rolled in on the set, a mystical effect. As the devotees disappeared under clouds of carbon dioxide, only Prabhupada remained clearly visible. Seeing the special effect unsuccessful, the producer motioned the devotees to stand and dance beside the Swami. The song ended and the camera closed in on Prabhupada. "Now you have 2 minutes, Swamiji," the producer said. Prabhupada began. "We have been chanting this Hare Krishna mantra. This is a transcendental sound vibration, none different from the Lord. The Lord's name and his forms are the same. Please chant this sublime sound and your life will become perfect. You will become happy and you will realize your true nature, that you are an eternal servant of God, Krishna. This process is called Bhakti Yoga, and we request everyone to take to this chanting. Thank you very much." Prabhupada was pleased as his disciples' record continued to be a hit in Europe. The Hare Krishna record is selling very nicely. Yesterday it sold 5,000 copies, and this week it is on the chronological list as 20. They say next week it will come to be 3, and after that it may come to 1. So they are very much hopeful of this record. To Satsvarupa in Boston, Prabhupada Road, the Hare Krishna record is going on in England nicely, and I heard that in Australia it stands fourth on the list of 50 important records. Hare Krishna Mantra became the #1 song in West Germany, #1 in Czechoslovakia, and among the top 10 all over Europe and even in Japan. With the income from the record, the devotees began paying their bills and financing renovations of Buri Place temple. Sometimes the devotees would perform at concerts with professional groups, and sometimes they would receive invitations to appear in nightclubs. After one particular late and nasty nightclub engagement, Yamuna went to Prabhupada and told him what the place had been like. Prabhupada called for all the devotees. "These places," he explained, "are not good for brahmacharis. The principle is that we have to make devotees. So we have to think where we are going. If we are going somewhere to preach but we can't make any devotees there, what is the use? So we have to think like that." He said he wasn't forbidding them to preach in nightclubs, but he told them to be careful. One of the devotees asked if showing slides of Krishna mixed with psychedelic slides was permissible. Prabhupada said no. Krishna should be on the throne or on altar. If they watered Krishna consciousness down, it would become idol worship. Not since Prabhupada had first left India in 1965 had he preached to Indians as extensively as now. Indians would always attend his lectures, and even if they didn't dance and chant, they appreciated Krishna consciousness. Even before Prabhupada's arrival in England, a few Indians had stepped forward to help the devotees, and now the majority of Prabhupada's occasional guests at Tittenhurst were Indians. Bringing their families, they would sit and chant with Prabhupada, often inviting him to their homes or for come to our house. We received him with a warm welcome, and many other people also came to hear him. He was very much pleased to see that we had our family deities of Radha and Krishna given by our mother, and he commented, I am very much pleased to come to this place and see that Radha and Krishna are here. He gave a very nice lecture and told that the purpose of human form of life is self-realization. He said, one should be able to know who he is. All those assembled who have come to hear him were very much pleased and impressed by his lecture. After his lecture, we distributed prasadam to everyone. Prabhupada took the prasadam and he was very much pleased to take prasadam in our house. As he was leaving, I requested him, when can I see you next? He said, you can see me anytime you want. Sometimes they would be talking and always convincing. The Indians were respectful to Prabhupada and repeatedly invited him to their homes. One of the Britain's most prominent and respected Indian visited men with the means to help Prabhupada's mission, but few were willing to sacrifice. The second was only a few weeks away. Once the moon had received much press coverage and Prabhupada would speak of them often. Reporters query on the possibility of man's landing on the moon. Just like we are going from one place to another by motor car or by airplane, this mechanical process will not help us to go to the moon planet. The process is different, as described in the Vedic literature. One has to qualify. According to our literature, our information, it is not possible. In this body, we cannot go there. At Tittenhurst, Prabhupada often brought up the moon landing while talking with his disciples. The moon landing was an ox. He said one evening in his room, for they cannot go to the moon. The moon planet, Chandralok, is a residence of the demigods, higher beings than these drunkards and cow eaters, slaughterers who are trying to inhabit it. You cannot think this travel is allowed. Like when I migrated from India to US, the moon planet cannot be visited so quickly. It is not possible. Srila Prabhupada's disciple accepted his statements. He was giving not simply his opinion but the verdict of Vedic scriptures. Because he accepted Vedic authority over modern science, so did his disciples, not but not Purushottama. Detecting Purushottama's dubious mentality, Prabhupada would often joke lightly in Purushottama's presence. Someone would ask a question, where is Janaki? And Prabhupada would reply, oh, Janaki has gone to the moon. Then everyone except Purushottam would laugh. The devotees knew of Purushottama's difficulty. He was an American and proud that the Americans were conquering space, and they knew that Prabhupada was joking about it. Purushottam was up on latest scientific advancement. He was impressed by NASA's achievement and astronaut Neil Armstrong's giant step for mankind. Although Purushottam went on with his duties, he became sullen, and Prabhupada noted his lack of enthusiasm. One morning, Purushottam and Yamuna were together with Prabhupada in his room. Purushottam had several days' growth of beard and was wearing the same orange sweater he had slept in, whereas Yamuna was neat and clean. Although she had only two simple cotton saris, she would always put on a freshly washed and ironed one before going to see Prabhupada. Looking at his two servants, Prabhupada said, Yamuna, you have so many saris. They are all so beautiful. Yamuna looked up at Prabhupada in surprise. I don't have so many, Srila Prabhupada. No, he said, you are wearing a nice piece of cloth every day. It's so nice. You're always looking so neat and clean, and your tilak. Purushottam, what do you think? Who do you think has the best tilak? Purushottam didn't answer. Beautiful Tilak, Prabhupada said, means beautiful person. About 6 o'clock that same evening, Yamuna was cooking puris and potatoes for Prabhupada when she heard him ring the servant's bell. Leaving the ghee on the fire, she ran up to Prabhupada's quarters. He talked with her about the lecture he would give that evening and eventually asked, when will Prasadam be ready? Before the discourse? Yes, Srila Prabhupada, I am. Yamuna smelled smoke. Oh, she gasped. Please excuse me, Prabhupada. I have left some ghee on the fire. Rushing downstairs, she found the kitchen filled with black smoke. She couldn't see the stove. Purushottam, Purushottam, she cried. Purushottam arrived and together they groped through the smoke. Somehow, Purushottam extinguished the fire before it caused serious damage. Purushottam and Yamuna were covered with soot. Their faces were black and Purushottam orange sweater, his robes and Yamuna's sari were all blackened. Suddenly Prabhupada rang the servant's bell and they both hurried upstairs to tell him about the fire. When Janaki returned downstairs and saw the mess, she ran upstairs to Prabhupada's room where Yamuna and Purushottam stood still covered with soot before Prabhupada. What has happened here? Janaki burst out. Prabhupada looked at her soberly and said, today Purushottam has gone to moon. What? Janaki asked. Prabhupada repeated, yes, our Purushottam has gone to the moon. Prabhupada. Purushottam said, I am a brahmachari. Why are you saying these things? Being a brahmachari is no restriction from going to the moon. Anyone can go, Prabhupada said, winking. The devotees regularly encountered John and Yoko. Although originally interested in a business relationship, John was inclined toward the devotees, but his friends advised him not to get involved with the Swami and his group, so he remained aloof. Ishana Das. I am in the kitchen working, and John was sitting at the piano. He had a piano in the kitchen and a great upright piano with all the varnish removed bare wood. And in this way, he was sitting at the piano playing Hare Krishna. The man was actually a great musician, and he played Hare Krishna in every musical idiom he could think of bluegrass music, or classical music, or rock and roll, or whatever. He would go at will from one idiom to another, always singing Hare Krishna. It was so natural for him, and one could see that he was a musical genius. And in this way, he was entertaining me, and he was obviously really enjoying it. So, anyway, while this piano playing was going on with great vigor and enthusiasm, this chanting Hare Krishna, his wife Yoko Ono, appeared in a nightgown or what have you, what have you, and said in a very distressed tone, please, John, I have a terrible headache. Can't you stop that sort of thing and come upstairs with me? George was different. He was drawn to Prabhupada. When one of the devotees had asked, why out of all the Beatles are only you interested? George had replied, it's my karma. One of the things in my sign is the spiritual side. George Harrison. Prabhupada just looked like I thought he would. I had liked I had like a mixed feeling of fear and awe about meeting him. That's what I liked about later on after meeting him more. I felt that he was just more like a friend. I felt relaxed. It was much better than at first because I hadn't been able to tell what he was saying and I wasn't sure if I was too worldly to even be there. But later I relaxed and felt much more at ease with him and he was very warm towards me. He wouldn't talk differently to me than to anybody else. He was always just speaking about Krishna, and it was coincidental who happened to be there. Whenever you saw him, he would always be the same. It wasn't like one time he would tell you to chant Hare Krishna mantra and then the next time say, oh no, I made a mistake. He was always the same. Seeing him was always a pleasure. Sometimes I would drop by thinking I wasn't planning to go, but I better go because I ought to, and I would always come away just feeling so good. I was conscious that he was taking a personal interest in me. It was always a pleasure. George was attracted to Krishna and he liked to chant. Even before meeting Prabhupada, he had learned something of Krishna from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, from the autobiography of Paramahamsa Yogananda, and from traveling in India. But Prabhupada's instructions in particular impressed upon him that Lord Krishna was the absolute truth, the origin of everything. It was very having like Krishna is not limited, and just by Prabhupada's being, I was moved. Krishna. That's all you. These pictures showing Krishna in the heart of a dog and a cow and a human being. It helps me to realize that Krishna is within everyone. Have been teaching some higher aspects of meditation as a person everywhere. I mean, that also a nice young man and a devotee of Krishna. Materially, if he is a non-devotee and never utters the holy name of God, he cannot possess any good qualities. Many swamis and yogis in India, even some who considered themselves Vaishnavas, had no faith in or understanding of holy names of Krishna. But George liked to chant Hare Krishna, and he had put the holy name of Krishna in his songs, which were tremendously popular all over the world. So he was serving Krishna through his music, and that made all the difference. Mr. George Harrison appears to be a very intelligent boy, and he is, by the grace of Krishna, fortunate also. First day he came to see me, and he wanted to talk with me more. He has no Prabhupada also saw George as a rich man, and renowned Lord are not men, but Lord Chaitanya had propagating Krishna consciousness. Really nice impetus for after all, he is a Monai men have to be very cautiously dealt with in spiritual life. We have to sometimes
Prabhuji, your voice is
deal
breaking.
with
I'm not
them
sure
on
it's
account of
only for
preaching.
me, but for
Lord
others
Chaitanya
also.
Mahaprabhu has
Here also, Prabhuji. It's breaking.
again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear, but we'll see if it breaks again.
Okay. If boy cooperates with our movement, it will be very nice. He's a moneyed man. This will life. We have to sometimes deal with them on account of teaching work. Otherwise, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is strictly restricted to mix with them for Krishna conscious people. But we get instruction from Rupa Goswami that whatever opportunity is favorable for pushing Krishna consciousness, we should accept it. Prabhupada dealt with George cautiously but encouraged him to chant the Lord's name, take his prasadam, and surrender all his works to him. When the devotees in the US heard of Prabhupada's dealing with the Beatles, some of them exaggerated the closeness of the relationship, especially in the case of George Lennon. Prabhupada heard of this and immediately stopped it. Regarding the booklet you and Gargamuni are sending, in the introductory portion signed by you and Gargamuni, you have said that I am personally instructing John Lennon and George Harrison in the yoga of ecstasy. This is not very satisfactory. Of course, George Harrison sometimes come to see me and naturally I instruct him on the Bhakti Yoga, but the statement in the letter gives hint as if I have been invited by them for this. If this comes to their notice, they may take some objection which will not go to our credit. These things should not be publicly advertised, and I do not know why this has been done. Anyway, if you have not distributed many of them, you just try to take about the portion which is not a fact. George, Prabhupada never really suggested that I shouldn't do what I am doing. I heard that at different times he would say to the devotees that I was a better devotee because of my songs and the other things I was doing. He never actually said that to me, but I always heard that. And the good thing for me was that I didn't have a feeling why don't you pack in doing what you are doing and go and live in a temple somewhere? He never made me feel any different, like I wasn't quite in the club. He was never like that. I am a plain clothes devotee. It's like that. I saw my relationship that I should help when and where I could because I know people in society. It's like any half decent person, you just try and help each other a little bit. He was always pleased with me because anything I did was a help. I mean, not just to Krishna temple as such, but just to anything spiritual that I did, either through songs or whatever it pleased him. He was just always very friendly. He was always chanting, and at times he said to me, just to keep chanting all the time or as much as possible. I think once you do that, you'll realize the chanting is of benefit. There are some gurus who go around making out that they are it, but Prabhupada was saying, I am the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, which is really what it is. He wasn't saying, I am the greatest, I am God, and all that. With him, it was only in the context of being a servant and like that a lot. I think it's part of the spiritual thing. The more they know, then the more they actually know that they are servant, and the less they know, the more they think they are actually God's gift of mankind. So although he was uh, obviously a very powerful individual, very spiritual advanced, he always retained that humbleness, and I think that it is one of the most important things because you learn more than all the words he say, you learn really from the example of how he lives and what he does. The Daily Sketch reported, Krishna people dine out at John and Yoko's place. A photograph showed the devotees seated out of the doors taking prasadam. Lunchtime at Tittenhurst Park, stately home of John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and some of the Lennon's house guests take their places in yesterday's sunshine. The picnickers are followers of Indian Swami, His Divine Grace Abhay Charan Bhaktivedanta. They had adopted the ways of the East from their clothes and shaven their heads right down to the Indian curry they ate with their fingers, which is all rather out of character for a place like Tittenhouse Park, which cost John 150,000 pounds and covers 60 acres of most exclusive Sunning Hill near Royal Ascot Race Course. Prabhupada and his people and John and Yoko and uh, their mates an odd combination, and dates made an odd combination. 2 days after Prabhupada's arrival at Tittenhurst, John and Yoko had flown to Canada to perform with Plastic Ono Band at Toronto's Rock and Roll Revival at Varsity Stadium. In October, John and Yoko had recorded wedding album and begun working on the film Rock and Roll Circus, and John had recorded Cold Turkey. Although John was usually shy, the devotees working at the main house found him open-hearted and generous with his position. He invited the devotees to stay permanently at Tittenhurst and farm. Whatever he had, he said he would share with them. One day Yoko asked Yamuna if a devotee couple could stand in for her and John on stage at a London theatre. She and John had previously appeared there dressed in only a burlap bag and were supposed to make another appearance, but Yoko thought perhaps a devotee couple could take their place. The crowd, she said, might never know the difference, and even if they did, it would be a hilarious publicity stunt for devotees. Politely declining, Yamuna explained why devotees could never do such a thing. When she stopped Prabhupada, he was adamant. When she told Prabhupada he was adamant, none of his disciples would go. for days after he condemned this sensuality. John invited Prabhupada to a manor to hear his recent recording of Cold Turkey. Although such a song held little interest for Prabhupada, John whimsically wanted him to hear it. Taking the opportunity to preach to the great man of the world, Prabhupada went. Within John's main sitting room, Prabhupada sat on the couch before the fireplace. The tape was ready on the large 16-track machine that had recorded it, and as Prabhupada sat patiently, John began to work the controls. But the machine wouldn't play. John began under his breath, turning knobs and pushing buttons. Although only Purushottam had accompanied Prabhupada, two other devotees hid outside beneath the windows listening. When they peeked in and saw John struggling with the machine, they began giggling in the shadows. Oh, said, Prabhupada said, so your machine is not working. Well, never mind. We have also made some recording and we would like to play this music for your pleasure. John resigned himself to listening to Prabhupada singing, and Prabhupada was saved from the cold turkey. Prabhupada kept his visit short. As he was leaving, he saw on the wall framed life-size photo of John and Yoko naked. He also saw black and white silhouettes of a man and woman in various positions of sexual intercourse. On returning to his room, he commented, "It is not good for us to continue staying here." He asked Mukunda to find him an apartment in London. The Puri Place renovations were still incomplete, and Prabhupada said he preferred to be in the city so that he could oversee the work. The natural setting of Titan host was pleasant, but Prabhupada's way of life and his was incompatible. One day, John and Yoko, dressed in black, came to visit Prabhupada. Acknowledging him to be a great yogi with mystic power, they asked him to use his powers to arrange with Krishna that they be reunited after death. Prabhupada was disappointed. "This is not my business," he said. "Krishna provides you with life, and he takes it away in the form of death. It is impossible that you can be reunited after death. When you go back to Godhead, you can be united with Krishna. But husband and wife, this is simply a mundane relationship. It ends with the body at the time of death. You cannot pick up this kind of relationship again after death." At one end of the estate lived a bricklayer and his wife in a small, neglected Georgian house. Hired by John to build a recording studio on the property, the bricklayer had only recently moved to Tittenhurst. A tough, burly man, he never spoke to the devotees until one day he asked several of them if they believe in ghosts. "Oh yes," Kulashekara said. "Prabhupada says there are ghosts." "I don't believe," the bricklayer said. "My wife is having dreams, but I don't believe in ghosts." The bricklayer's wife revealed that both she and her husband had been hearing something at night. Last night they had gone running to John Lennon's house, terrified, complaining of sounds, chains rattling, heels pounding, and the noise of something like a body being dragged across the floor. The bricklayer had seen his wife violently shaken by the shoulders, although no one else was there. When the devotees told Prabhupada, he said, "You tell John Lennon that if he wants, we can get rid of these ghosts." Mukunda relayed the message, but John had already invited his friend, a white witch, to come and exorcise the ghost. The warlock visited the bricklayer's cottage and a few devotees tagged along. Over the fireplace in the main room, they found a carving of a person with a ghost coming out of his forehead, and on the opposite wall, mahogany runes. These are ancient witch runes. The warlock said, shaking his head, "I can't do anything here." When John asked the devotees to try their method, Prabhupada directed them. At the bricklayer's cottage, they should sprinkle water offered to Krishna in the doorways, blow conch shell, and then have kirtan. A group of devotees went and Kulashekara led the kirtan. After half an hour of chanting, Kulashekara felt a great release of pressure within the room, and the kirtan became ecstatic. The devotees returned to their engagements, assuring John that the ghost would not return, and the bricklayer and his wife moved in again. The next morning, Prabhupada passed the old cottage on his walk. So, how is the ghost? He asked. No news, Prabhupada, Kulashekar replied. The following morning, Prabhupada again asked, how is the ghost? Would they like to have him back? Years ago in India, Prabhupada said, when he was running his chemical business, he had detected ghosts in building at night. What did you do? One of the devotees asked. I simply chanted Hare Krishna, and the ghost would go away. Prabhupada then opened his eyes wide and gestured with both hands, mimicking the frightened workers in the plant who had come running to him. Babaji, Babaji, there is a ghost, there is a ghost. The devotees laughed. Actually, Prabhupada said, there are many ghosts here, especially over by the stable areas. They are attached to this place, but they will not harm you if you just chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada was anxious to leave Tittenhurst, and by late October, some of the devotees had moved to Bury Place. Prabhupada no longer had any business at Tittenhurst. Mr. Lennon was an influential person who had seemed interested in Krishna, but now there was no point in Prabhupada staying on that estate. Yoko and her ex-husband Dan, now George's manager, were also pressing John to be rid of devotees. Dan complained that the devotees were trying to take over the place. The devotees, on the other hand, complained to John that Dan and Yoko were misrepresenting them. On one side were Dan and Yoko, and other side the uh, devotees. John was in the middle. He had to choose. John told Mukunda that as far as he was concerned, he got along fine with the devotees, but the people around him were having difficulty. He would give the devotees a couple more weeks to move to their new temple in the city. The devotees were already in the process of moving to Buri Place, and Mukunda had found an apartment for Prabhupada in a short drive from the temple. In a few days, everything would be ready for Prabhupada to move. On the day Prabhupada left Tittenhurst, he stopped at his car and he said, I want to say goodbye to a few friends first. He then took a last walk through the grounds, giving careful attention to the trees, sometimes touching their leaves, just as on his morning walks. Then he left. The next day, a severe storm swept through the Tittenhurst estate, breaking windows and uprooting trees. November 3, 1969. Prabhupada moved into his furnished apartment on Baker Street, a 10-minute drive from Buri Place Temple. After 2 months in London, he was anxious to see his temple open, and Shamasundar was working hard, although progressing slowly. For the temple's interior, Shamsundar had an artistic concept taken from photographs he had seen of Ajanta caves, South Indian temples with walls and ceilings of carved stone. His inspiration was to produce a similar effect using Californian redwood he and Mukunda had shipped to England a year ago. On first hearing the plan, Prabhupada had asked, why make it so aristocratic? But Shamasundar had been so set on the idea that Prabhupada had permitted him. With the ceiling partly finished, there was no turning back. Shamasundar toiled back day and night, yet each day the temple design seemed to grow more elaborate, with the walls and floor fashioned of solid redwood and the ceiling lined with red wood arches. Shamasundar took great care to see that each piece fit exactly into place. As Shamasundar inched along, devotees joked that the room looked like an upside down boat, but Prabhupada encouraged him, telling him it was very beautiful. Prabhupada often allowed his disciples to work as they liked. He reasoned that they were raising the money and could spend it in Krishna's service as they pleased. He also did not care to interfere in every detail of a disciple's service, especially when that disciple was strong headed and had ideas that were not harmful or obstructive. All Prabhupada's disciples were ultimately under his absolute decision, but he was often lenient, 80% lenient, he would sometimes say. Shamsundar particularly thrived on having his own big projects. He had arranged for Mantra Rock Dance in San Francisco, built the first Rath Yatra carts, established a friendship with George Harrison, and now he was designing a temple. Prabhupada allowed it, watching watchfully like a father. Consulting the Vedic calendar, Prabhupada chose December 14th for the temple opening celebration, and despite predictions from Shama Sundar and others that the deadline would be impossible to meet, Prabhupada ordered invitations printed immediately. The devotees had tremendous work to do and little time. Not only did they had the temple to complete, but also Prabhupada's quarters on the second floor and the kitchen in the basement. Faced with their tight deadline, they worked harder. As Prabhupada was anxious about the temple opening, he was also anxious about publishing the first volume of Krishna, but he had no money. According to printers' estimates, the book would cost about $19,000. Prabhupada told Shamasundar to ask his friend George for a donation. Shamasundar, who had always been careful not to ask for George for money, was hesitant. But Prabhupada insisted and Shamasundar gave in. George agreed but regretted it afterwards. Then Shamasundar began to feel sorry. After all, he hadn't really wanted to ask George, and George hadn't really wanted to be asked. When Prabhupada heard of this, he invited George to see him. George told Prabhupada that every day people were asking him for his money. But when Prabhupada explained the importance of Krishna book and how George's donation would be devotional service to Krishna, George dismissed his regrets. He also agreed to write a foreword to the volume. George: I didn't really think I was qualified to write the foreword to Prabhupada's book, but one way of looking at it is because I am known it would help. But from the other point of view, it could really hinder because not everyone want to listen or to believe what I say. There are a lot of people who would be put off just because I am saying it. I mean, if I picked up a book on Krishna and the foreword was written by Frank Zappa or somebody like that, I would think, God, maybe I don't want to know about it. So I thought that although he asked me, maybe Prabhupada didn't really want me to write the foreword, but it was one of those things I couldn't get out of. Everybody had their minds made up. You are writing the foreword and that's it. So I just did it. When Srila Prabhupada asked to watch the moon landing, the devotees rented a television and placed it in the Prabhupada's living room. Prabhupada took his massage as usual, sitting in a chair before the television. Purushottama announced, Well, Prabhupada, it's about time. So I'll turn on the television and soon we'll be getting some pictures from the astronauts out in the space. A reporter was speaking from Cape Canaveral, Florida. We are just about to get the first pictures of his historical location. The picture appeared fuzzy, then cleared. The spacecraft had landed on the moon. As the astronauts emerged from the ship, they slowly eased themselves down onto the moon's surface. Purushottam was in ecstasy. Dhananjaya: I was attempting to massage Prabhupada's head and at the same time watch the program. All of a sudden, as the men were landing, Prabhupada motioned for me to sit in front of him, so I came around. As soon as I sat down, Prabhupada started to massage my head. I was quite embarrassed. You have forgotten how to massage properly? He asked. This is how you do it. He massaged my head for about 2 minutes. Then I stood behind Prabhupada and again began massaging his head. By this time, the astronauts were moving across the landscape. They had gotten out their little American flag and were sticking it in the ground and were jumping up and down. Apparently, they were defying gravity because every time they jumped up, they would float through the air and then gently land again. There was a lot of jubilation and sounds from them. So, Purushottama, Prabhupada asked, they have come to the moon? Yes, Prabhupada, Purushottam said excitedly. They have landed on the moon. Prabhupada smiled. Dhananjaya. Again, Prabhupada motioned me to the front. I moved around and sat down. I thought he wanted me to massage him from the front, but again he put his hands on my head and massaged. He said, Can't you learn this simple thing, massaging my head? I had been watching the television and not giving my full attention to my service. I tried again, but again Prabhupada said, You still don't know how to do this. I said, Well, Prabhupada, I am trying my hardest. He laughed and said, That is all right, continue. Prabhupada asked Purushottam, So what can you see? What can you see? They are exploring the moon's surface, he said. So what is there? Well, It looks like they have landed inside a crater somewhere, and the ground is sandy with some rocks. Oh, look, they are showing some shadows from some of the rocks that are lying around. That's all you can see. There are no people, there are no trees, there are no rivers, there are no buildings. No, Purushottama replied. The moon is barren. They have not landed on the moon, Prabhupada said emphatically. This is not the moon. Later, when Malati brought in Prabhupada's lunch, he said, what Malati has done, she has made this little khichari for Krishna, and that is far greater than what they have done. Even though Prabhupada's quarters were incomplete and temple renovation made 7 beauty days noisy and hectic, Prabhupada decided to move in. I am not attached to a comfortable apartment, he said. My apartment is to live in the association of the devotees. He was moving into the temple at a time when record sales were low and the devotees were having to purchase supplies piecemeal whenever they got money. Yet, with Prabhupada living with them and supervising their work, they were satisfied. Tamal Krishna arrived from Los Angeles, and in addition to supervising much of the construction, he began taking the devotees out daily to chant on the streets and sell back to God in magazines. Yamuna was sewing curtains from the morning until night. Ishana, Shyamasundar, and others were working every possible hour on the renovation. And every day, Prabhupada would walk through the building to see the progress. With only 1 week left until the opening, Shyamasundar still labored on the temple ceiling. He had not even begun the altar. Again, the devotees complained to Prabhupada that Shyamasundar was too slow, but Prabhupada replied, he wants to make it artistic. Let him do it. Shyamasundar, this time on his own, asked George for a donation for an altar. George gave 2,000 pounds, and Shamsundar picked out a slab of golden sienna marble and 2 slabs of red marble. Although Prabhupada had a pair of 17 inches carved wooden deities of Radha and Krishna, he didn't plan to use them. And the size of the altar Shamsundar was building clearly required larger deities. One day, Mr. Doyal phoned, representing a large London Hindu society. He had heard that devotees wanted Radha Krishna deities and he had a pair he would donate. When Prabhupada heard the news, he sent Tamal, Krishna, Mukunda, and Shamasundar to Mr. Doyal's home to see the deities. Radha and Krishna were white marble and stood about 3 feet high. Never before had the devotees seen such large deities, and they offered obeisances. When they returned to the temple and told Prabhupada, he said, take me there at once. Srila Prabhupada, accompanied by Shamsundar, Mukunda, and Tamal Krishna, arrived by van at Mr. Doyal's home. Prabhupada entered the living room and sat down. The deities, covered by a cloth, stood on a table in the corner. Tamal Krishna was about to unveil them when Prabhupada checked him. No, that's all right. Prabhupada sat and spoke with Mr. Doyal, asking him about his work and where he had come from in India, and he met Mr. Doyal's family. Prabhupada and his host chatted while the devotees listened. Swamiji, Mr. Doyal said at length, I want to show you my deities. Yes, Prabhupada replied, I will see them after some time. Prabhupada began to speak about his Krishna consciousness mission, and after a while, Mr. Doyal again requested, please take a look at these deities. And with that, he walked over and unveiled Radha and Krishna. Oh yes, Prabhupada said, folding his hands respectfully. Mr. Doyal explained that he had ordered the deities from India for his own use, but in transit a tiny piece of Radha's Rani's finger had chipped off. Therefore, according to Hindu tradition, the deities could not be installed. Tamal Krishna, Prabhupada said, see how heavy these deities are. Tamal Krishna, placing one hand at Radharani's base and the other around her shoulder, lifted her not so heavy. Shamsundar replied, see how heavy is Krishna? The deities were actually heavy for one man to carry, but the devotees understood Prabhupada's intention. Not bad, Shamsundar said, holding Krishna a few inches off the table. Yes, Prabhupada said conclusively, I think they are all right. Let us take them. We have our van. And suddenly Prabhupada was leaving with his disciples following, carefully carrying Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada thanked Mr. Doyal. But Swamiji, protested Mr. Dayal, who was not prepared for this sudden exit. Please, we will arrange to bring them. Our society will bring them. But Prabhupada was already out the door and leading his men to the van. Please wait, Mr. Dayal persisted. We have to fix them first, then you can take them. We have an expert man, Prabhupada said. He can fix these things. Prabhupada was assuring Mr. Dayal and at the same time directing his disciples. He opened the door of the van and Shyamsundar and Tamal Krishna slowly entered cautiously setting Radha and Krishna within. Tamal Krishna knelt in the back to hold the deities secure while Shyamsundar got into the driver's seat. Now drive, Prabhupada said, and off they went, with Prabhupada smiling from the window to Mr. Dayal and his family who stood together on the curb. Shyamasundar had driven but a few blocks when Prabhupada asked him to stop the van. Turning around in his seat, Prabhupada began offering prayers. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. He looked along at Krishna, who was white and with slight bluish cast, and at the exquisite while white Radharani by his side. Krishna is so kind, he said. He has come like this. Then he had Shyamasundar continued driving slowly back to the temple. Carefully, Prabhupada supervised his disciples carrying the deities up to the second floor. The devotees were astounded and delighted to see Prabhupada in such a animated and intense state, bringing Radha and Krishna into their temple. He had the deities placed in a curtained off section of his own room, and then he sat at his desk. Prabhupada smiled. Krishna has played a great trick. In the Mahabharata also he said, there are incidents where Krishna plays tricks. One such trick was Krishna's agreeing to be on the side of general he saw uh, first in the morning. The two opposing generals, Arjuna and Duryodhana, had both come to Krishna's tent early in the morning as Krishna slept. They had agreed that one of them would stand at Krishna's head and the other at Krishna's feet, and that they would wait until Krishna awoke. Duryodhana chose to stand by Krishna's head, while Arjuna chose his feet. Krishna awoke and saw Arjuna. That was one great trick that was played by Krishna. Prabhupada said similarly, this is a great trick. He told how Krishna had also tricked Mother Yashoda when she had tried to discipline Krishna. He had run away and she had run after him, caught him, and tried to tie him with ropes. But every time she came with more rope, Prabhupada said, it was just a little too short. Krishna can play any kind of trick. Another such trick has been played. They made so much effort to bring these deities here, thinking they will be for their Hindu center, but all the time Krishna wanted to come here. So this chip on the deity's hand is such just is just Krishna's trick, and we have caught them. Prabhupada, Mukunda said, you kidnapped Krishna. Yes, Prabhupada said. Once I was in the bank and the manager had some scheme, but I foiled his scheme. So he said to me, Mr. De, you should have been a politician. Prabhupada laughed. Then he became grave and asked the devotees not to talk about the incident. Many people would not understand how he could install a chipped deity. The devotee agreed to keep the secret, but they had no doubt that Prabhupada's love for Krishna was transcendental to Hindu customs. Radha and Krishna had come to London on Prabhupada's desire. How do you dress big deities like this? Yamuna asked. They already have clothes on. Prabhupada said, you bring me some cloth. What kind of cloth, Prabhupada? What should be the clothes look like? Like in the pictures, he replied. Well, there are so many different pictures, she said. Sometimes Krishna has ruffled skirt on, and sometimes he has a dhoti on, and sometimes he has a big crown on. Krishna looks very beautiful in saffron, Prabhupada said. So you bring me some silk dhoti in yellow and saffron color. Yamuna collected 6 silk saris with silver and gold borders, and Prabhupada indicated the design he wanted and told Yamuna how to arrange the crowns. With only a few days remaining before the installation ceremony, Yamuna began working almost continuously at her sewing machine. Several times a day, Prabhupada would come to see her progress. Sham Sundar had completed most of the altar except for Lord Jagannath's altar and the canopy over Radha and Krishna throne. Both the canopy and Lord Jagannath's altar would be supported by four heavy wooden columns more than 6 feet high. Two rear columns would hold a marble slab for Jagannath deity to stand on, and two front columns were now supporting Radha and Krishna, large velvet canopy. The columns were big and heavy. Shamsundar called them elephant leg columns. The columns now stood in place on the altar, although Shamsundar hadn't had a chance to secure them. The day before the installation, Shamsundar collapsed upstairs in exhaustion. On opening day, many guests, Indian especially, crowded the temple, responding to flyers and advertisements. Apple Records had supplied a professional florist who had decorated the room with floral arrangements. A BBC television crew was on hand to videotape the ceremony. While most of the devotees held kirtan, Prabhupada behind a curtain at the other end of the temple bathed Radha and Krishna. The plan was that after the bathing ceremony, the deities would be placed on the altar and Yamuna would dress them. Once they were dressed and enthroned, the curtains would open for all the guests to behold Sri Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada would lecture and then everyone would feast, but because of Shamsundar's oversight, the installation almost became a disaster. Prabhupada had finished bathing the deities and they had been placed on the marble altar when suddenly the elephant leg columns tottered. The canopy above the deities began to collapse. Prabhupada, seeing the danger, jumped onto the altar and seized the heavy columns in a split second. With great strength, he held the two front pillars in place. Get this out of here, he shouted. While Prabhupada's arms protected the deities, the men removed the canopy, and then two men at a time carried each of the pillar away. The deities remained unharmed. While Prabhupada was behind the curtain rescuing Radha and Krishna, on the other side of the curtain, guests and reporters awaited the unveiling of the deities. Unaware of the mishap, the guests saw only men emerging from behind the curtain carrying large pillars and a canopy. The BBC camera crew began filming the canopy and pillars as they appeared from behind the curtain, taking them to be part of the ceremonial procession. The few devotees behind the curtain with Prabhupada were amazed, but there was no time now for apologies or appreciations. Yamuna addressed the deities, Prabhupada hurrying her. Um, when at last everything was ready, Prabhupada opened the main curtain, revealing the graceful forms of of Lord Krishna and Radharani to the temple, full of guests. A devotee began to offer arati while Prabhupada, wearing a saffron chadar and a garland of carnations, stood to one side, reverentially looking upon Radha and Krishna as their worshippers and protectors. This was the culmination of months of effort. Actually, years of planning had preceded this auspicious occasion. 100 years before, Bhaktivinoda Thakur had hoped for the day when Krishna consciousness would come to England, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had also decided. Now that an authorized temple of Radha and Krishna was preaching Krishna consciousness in London, it was a historic occasion for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. A long standing order of previous acharyas had been fulfilled. Prabhupada had sent invitations to several of his god brothers in India. None of them had been able to come, of course, but at least they should have been pleased to learn that this dream of Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had been fulfilled. Prabhupada was 73. He had now opened 21 temples in 3 years. Recently, he had told some of his disciples that they should try to form a governing body for Cont to reveal him of the management and allow him to relieve him of the management and allow him to concentrate fully on presenting Krishna consciousness literature. This literature could be introduced all over the world into homes, schools, colleges for benefit of everyone. It would be in such literature that he would live on. How much time he had left in this world, he didn't know. He said, but he wanted to go on serving and trying to please his Guru Maharaj life after life. Nevertheless, despite Prabhupada's desire to retire from the active work and absorb himself in writing books, here he was installing deities in a new temple and protecting them from the disciples' carelessness. Had he not been present, the celebration would have been a disaster. So many hard-working disciples, and they still needed his personal guidance. ISKCON was just beginning to grow. Prabhupada wanted to open not just 21 temples, but at least 108 temples. His world traveling and book printing were just beginning, and like everything else, the number of disciples would increase. The prestige of his movement would increase, and with its opposition from the atheists. Krishna consciousness was growing and Prabhupada was in front. All around I see bright, he said. That is the glory of Krishna. He saw himself as a servant of his spiritual master. The bright future was in Krishna's hands. Prabhupada called for Shamasundara. Although Prabhupada was angry at first because of the near disaster on the altar, he admitted that his disciples had done their best. The temple was beautiful. He told Shamasundar he liked it. He then asked that a sign be placed out front with gold letters on a blue background, Radha Krishna temple. This temple was constructed with great labor and effort by Shamasundar Das Adhikari. On the day of Prabhupada's departure from London, he distributed some of his personal effects, such as sweaters and scarves, to his disciples. He then went downstairs alone into the temple to see the deities. He offered fully prostrated obeisances on the floor for a long time and then stood looking at Radha and Krishna. Yamuna. Prabhupada was looking at the deities with complete devotion. He loved those deities. He had commented about their exquisite beauty and how they contemplated each other. How they complemented each other. How sometimes Radharani looked more beautiful, but how Krishna's moon-like face, eyes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay. Moon-like face and eyes were shining. Prabhupada saw me and matter of factly said, if you practice what I have taught you and follow the instructions of how I have taught you to worship the deity, and if you read the books that we have printed, it is sufficient for you to go back to Godhead. You need not learn anything new. Simply practice what I have taught you. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes, Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you for your narrating this. Yeah. Last pastime of our path. And Prabhuji, this is John Lennon. Can you hear Prabhuji?
Anyone want to hear?
Can you? Are you? Am I audible, Prabhuji?
I can hear you.
Okay, now I can hear you also. Yeah, I think earlier. It was this John Lennon. I
You can't
think,
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Prabhuji. The
There is a internet problem.
Yeah, I think your voice is breaking. Yeah. Yeah, I will ask later, Prabhuji. I think your voice is breaking. Hare Krishna.
Can you try now? I changed the network. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Prabhuji. Now I can hear you. The
Okay.
John Lennon, so there was this interaction of Prabhupada with John Lennon before also, right? But after this, there was not, I think, any more hearing or from John Lennon?
No, I asked for, no, I didn't hear. I don't know if someone knows more, but at least I didn't hear. At least in the Abhay Charan also, yeah. So we come to see only this part of the Leela.
And right after Prabhupada left, the next day it was Harikin or something there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Was it? Yeah, after that tree, right? After
Yes,
leaving from John.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
John, he also helped, no? I mean, Prabhupada mission
Yeah,
in preaching.
yeah. I mean, I don't know to what level, but at least there was something. At least we see from this part, we see that John was favorable for Krishna consciousness,
Yes.
but because the environment was not favorable, he didn't overcome that, and then
Yes.
didn't advance much.
Yes, Manoj, yes. Yeah, it's very nice, yeah, to hear all this, how they struggle. And still, I mean, Prabhupada, yeah, always he was appreciating devotees. Yeah. Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Prabhuji. John Lennon was more like Prabhuji hippie kind of. He had naked photos with girlfriend and
I don't know. At least if I mean, from the if you see the Beatles, yeah, and they're the one who had long hair with a very thick specs. I think he's from Japanese or something like that. I
yes.
don't know whether he was having hippie lifestyle. I don't know.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. Okay, then thank you so much for joining. पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। सोलिनस स्वरूप गोस्वामी महाराज की जय। हरे कृष्ण।
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
हरे कृष्ण।
Hare Krishna.
Hare
हरे
Krishna.
कृष्ण।